Judith Stephen. I'm one of the system administrators in the Enrico Fermi Institute at the University of Chicago. And I'll talk about some of our experiences upgrading all of our infrastructure from Enterprise Linux 7 to Enterprise Linux 9. Okay, so who are we? So our largest project that we support is the Midwest Tier 2 Center. So this is the largest Atlas Tier 2 center. We're also one of the largest WLCG sites in the world. So we have about 50,000 logical cores in our Condor pool. This is spread across our 3 different sites, so UChicago, IU, and University of Illinois. And so some nice pictures of our racks for all of our Atlas equipment and some of our internal monitoring. We do try to give about 10% of our cycles to the OS pool on a regular basis, sometimes more if we have the slots available. We also have storage and infrastructure to support this. In addition to the Midwest Tier 2, we also run an analysis facility for Jupyter machine learning, GPU work, or interactive work. We run the IRIS-HEP Scalable Systems Laboratory. So this is software R&D for the high luminosity LHC. There we go. Okay. So in addition to giving cycles, we also actually run some path infrastructure. So this is the path infrastructure that we run. So if you log into AP 20, 21, 22, or 23, this is where you're logging into at the University of Chicago. We have a Kubernetes cluster for Harbor, hosted CEs, various R&D, and then some specific collaboration support for the University of Chicago-based mid-scale collaborations such as South Pole Telescope, Xenon, COTO, and Future Colliders. So what is Enterprise Linux 7? What is Enterprise Linux 9? And why was this an issue anyway? So broadly, this is the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and it's free and open rebuilds. So for a while, up until EL7, we were actually running Scientific Linux on most of our machines, which was coming out of Fermilab. That unfortunately kind of ended with EL7. And so we started migrating to EL8, particularly with our management machines once they started coming out. And then Red Hat decided to change CentOS, or the direction of the CentOS project. So had a lot of discussions as a community to figure out what we were going to do about this. Eventually, we decided to use Alma Linux 9 for at least UChicago and Indiana University going forward. Maybe? Okay. So how long have we been working on this? We've been working on this for a while. So we had a couple of test machines running more than a year ago, but we really started running Alma Linux 9 machines in production about a year ago in July of 2023. So our newest infrastructure, we installed Alma Linux 9 on it, and we're running it in production for a couple of months to kind of iron out some of the hiccups. And then in about March, we took off the rest of our the rest of our compute nodes. We upgraded UC and IU. And then after we finished that upgrade, we kind of have trickled along with everything else. And we're kind of paranoid, so we drain all of our storage before upgrading nodes so that we don't lose data, et cetera. So it's been a slow slope after we got all of our compute updated. But for the most part, we are almost there. One of the first things we had to run into was that our existing build infrastructure didn't actually support installing EL9. We ran into a number of issues. So probably a lot of other sites use Cobbler. We had Cobbler 2.8, and we just couldn't install EL9 machines using Cobbler 2.8. We did then upgrade our Cobbler to 3. I think it was 3.2 at the time. And that worked for a couple of machines, but then we started seeing other issues as we were adding our existing infrastructure into our new Cobbler. Just the more machines we added, the slower everything got. So that was a big hurdle for us that we needed to decide what to do about. There were also some other minor things. There weren't any packages for EL7. So our existing build infrastructure that we needed to have some Cobbler interaction with, we couldn't install yet on there. And then also because Red Hat Satellite, which is Red Hat's product, is kind of it used to be based on Cobbler, now it's based on Foreman. So when that changed, it seemed like the support kind of dwindled down to one person who was really supporting Cobbler. So after working with Cobbler for a couple of months, when Cobbler 3, we decided to migrate to something else. We do already use Puppet for our configuration management, which integrates really nicely into Foreman. So we already had the infrastructure set up. We decided then we could try to get the provisioning side working as well on what we already had. This ended up being fairly painless, actually, because we were able to leverage a bunch of the underlying build infrastructure that we needed for Cobbler to then work with our Foreman instead. So it didn't have to rebuild all that much. So briefly, what about sites not using Cobbler? So there are other build tools that you can use. You don't have to use Cobbler. But it seems like the two main ones that I have other colleagues have used, so XCAT and ROX cluster, seem to be kind of dwindling similarly. So then, of course, there's Red Hat Satellite, which is now based on Foreman. So that's another reason why we kind of decided to go with Foreman. We initially had a number of machines, mostly management machines, that were CentOS 8. We then converted them to CentOS 8 Stream. But then, so then when we decided that we were going to go with Alma Linux, very helpfully, Alma Linux provided a migration guide so that we could just convert our EL8 machines back over to Alma Linux 8, and we didn't have to rebuild them. So this was extremely helpful for us. It knocked down a number of machines that we otherwise didn't have to fully rebuild, like NFS servers and such. So we had many of them converted by June 1st, but then June 1st came around and the repositories evaporated. So we figured out what to do about this for a couple days, and then we realized that they're actually not gone. They're just moved. So they are actually still available. There's the actual vault.centos.org and then a mirror. So we updated our repository configuration, and then we were able to continue on with our upgrades or with our migrations. Finally, when we got Alma Linux 9 installed on some machines, and so we were at the point where we had to then start going through our configuration management and update that for things like package names changing, Python packages are now Python 3 rather than Python 3.6, et cetera. But we found a couple of things that kind of slowed us down at the beginning, just kind of had to rework some of our pipeline. So root SSH apparently now is disallowed by default. We usually turn it off, but at the very beginning, when we first have to SSH into the machine, we usually go in via root. So we have to figure out what exactly we're going to do, just kind of rework our pipeline a little bit. We also ran into an issue with our existing MFA SSH configuration. So on all of our access points, or some of our user-facing systems, we require MFA. And we found that it was broken, and we didn't quite understand why. Turns out that now, at least at Alma Linux, I don't know about other distributions, but there's this new configuration file that just turned off half of what we needed in order for our MFA SSH configuration to work. So now we know that. We have it now in our configuration management, and now it worked again. A number of things like that that we worked through. Yep.
Have you had any issues with SSHing to network switches or anything of that nature from Alma 9? We did.
We have not yet, but we don't usually have to SSH directly to our switches. Our network team.
They disabled SHA-1 and a few other things.
That is on my next slide. So SHA-1 has been a thing that we've had to deal with time and time again. So this affects switches and certificate authorities, particularly some of our European certificate authorities were SHA-1 based. SSH key, so probably if you were using an RSA key on one of the APs, we asked you to update your keys. So this affected a lot. For some of our machines that we couldn't actually couldn't easily update, we do have our default crypto policy set to SHA-1, but we try not to do this as much as possible. We also found that there were a number of drivers that have been just retired because it's for really old hardware. So our R410s, our R610s, our R710s, some of the drivers for the network cards and the disk controllers were just no longer in the base image. So instead of spending a lot of time trying to get EL9 installed on those, we're just finally retiring them. And also Python 2 is really gone now. For the handful of things you still have running with 2.7, you have to get them upgraded to 3.9. Luckily, some things actually still do work, for now at least. So Network Manager, it's been what we have been needing to migrate to as far as managing our network. Luckily, the ifconfig format still works. There was a warning that this will actually be removed next iteration or next major release. So we will finally need to embrace Network Manager. Also, firewall configuration, we use IP tables to manage our firewall. We need to then replace this with NF tables, but luckily IP tables is still working as well. Okay. So the other thing we needed to upgrade to OSG23. So this was actually a very, very simple change for us. We didn't really have any major hiccups. That said, we did look at our configuration before we upgraded, and we cleaned up 10 plus years of cruft, which undoubtedly helped a lot. So we learned to use the defaults as much as possible. We removed the lines that said, this makes the negotiator work faster that we put in 10 years ago or whatever. And also we updated our pool security settings to use tokens. So we have no complaints about the OSG23 upgrade. So big thanks to the path team to actually making that possible. So why did we do this? Because we were worried that a security vulnerability was going to come out July 1st for EL7 machines, and we didn't want to have to deal with hundreds of machines that needed to be mitigated. So we got most of our EL9 migrations done by the end of June. I think we have 9 or 10 left. So as predicted, we did have a vulnerability that came out on July 1st. So there's an OpenSSH regression CVE that came out. Unfortunately, this only affected EL9. So instead of only having to do 10 machines, we had to do like 1,000 machines. So we updated our OpenSSH. We checked to make sure after everything restarted, we're mitigated at this point. Then the next week, the same thing happened. Just this past Monday, when beginning of the conference, we did the whole thing again. So please, if you've already updated your EL9 machines, check your OpenSSH to make sure that you've updated. So, in summary, a lot of planning went into this. The entire team has been working on this for better part of a year, and then prep before that. So it really did help to not feel too rushed at the very end of the deadline. We did spend a lot of time updating, and in addition to just physically updating the servers, kind of taking a look at our build infrastructure, seeing what we could improve, what needed to be updated. And so sometimes it's good to pay down some of that technical debt. And then after you have all your planning done, you have to be flexible. Sometimes the upstream vendor just decides to pull your support. So figuring out how to deal with that is always useful. And seriously, update your OpenSSH. I think that's the end of my talk. So any questions, comments, concerns?